Hate is a Strong Word by Cortney Lamar Charleston. Cortney Lamar Charleston is originally from the Chicago suburbs. He graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a BA in Economics and Urban Studies, which is often prevalent in his writing. He published Hate is a Strong Word in March of 2018. Charleston often writes about class, race, sexuality, family, and identity. He often combines art and activism and incorporates many literary devices. His first published collection was Telepathologies.
Moving on to Charleston's other works, his topics of choice are immediately evident in the titles of his works. These works include A Brief History of Violence, Devotion, I Am on the Battlefield for My Lord, Every Day Something Has Tried to Kill Me and Has Failed, Gazelle for the Bathing Ape, The Hood, I'm Not a Racist, Lesson for Courtney, Melanophobia, Fear of Black, Obama versus McCain, and Sonic and Knuckles.
As for Charleston's honors and awards, he has been offered many fellowships. He is a 2017 Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellow, a 2017 New Jersey State Council on the Arts Fellow, a 2016 The Conversation Literary Festival Fellow, and a 2015 Cave Cannon Foundation Fellow. As for prizes and awards, he was the 2019 Pushcart Prize winner, the 2016 Saturnalia Books Poetry Prize winner, a two-time Jeffrey E. Smith Editors Prize finalist in both 2017 and 2018. He was a 2017 Best of the Net finalist, a 2016 New Issues Poetry Prize finalist, 2016 Best of the Net finalist, 2015 Lena Miles Weaver Todd Poetry Prize finalist, 2015 Auburn Witness Poetry Prize finalist, 2016 Discovery and Boston Review Poetry Prize semifinalist, and in 2018 he was a Sandy Crimmins National Poetry Prize Editor's Choice selection.
When considering the time period relevancy, one can see that the line, "I love you, tar baby, I love you," is most likely a reference to tarring and feathering, a humiliating punishment that found its prime in pre-revolution America. It was very capable of being fatal either by the use of genuine, fully heated tar or through the infections that can manifest through even moderate burns. When considering the contemporary nature of Charleston's works, it can be inferred that the reference to this harsh colonial punishment is a statement of how we are still discriminating against marginalized groups of people for the same reasons the American colonists were, suggesting that we still have a lot to learn from our mistakes.
So aside from talking about the author's background and the history of the time period, it's also important to read the poem out loud to get a feel for the rhythm of the poem.
Hate is a strong word. Muscular as a stallion, in fact. But I have no horse in this race of people against people. It was made certain I wouldn't, that I'd inherit nothing except a whipping of my hindquarters as a form of correction in the cadence of, I love you, tar baby, I love you. This is not unlike how my parents were raised, to comply, and their parents before them, and theirs before them, and so forth as far back as anyone cared to speak of what they lived through, the preposterous preposition of it all. Therefore and thereafter, whenever I hear the word pedigree, I think of the blank check I don't have behind my name, and then I think of saddles and stirrups, and then the soreness of my lower back, and then the source of that. How a boss can ride you. Of this I am personally familiar, plus know by blood drawn from two lines of family men forced to cut out their own tongues to keep food on the table they could no longer taste or even stand to. Their tongues grew back, yes, after some time and with sharpness, I'm told, needing to cut against something, anything, to be purposeful given their new forms. Woe, 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 how a man rides his wife, his children, how he'd ride a horse he'll never have, could never give them unless said horse is immaterial, hence not a horse at all, just muscular, as a stallion is, as a word is that's denied striving families horsepower, any engine beyond their fragile bodies to propel them forward, the whole race, forward, even if it pits people against a people, even if it means rearing a rear end tender and raw. I love you, tar baby. I love you, something strong.
So stanzas 1 interpretation. Muscular as a stallion, in fact, but I have no horse in this race of people against people. So if you consider the title, line 1, then it would be hate is a strong word, muscular as a stallion, in fact, meaning that hate is as muscular as a stallion. The repetition of the word people emphasizes the idea of no labels, that people are people. And overall, hate is strong like a horse, though the narrator is not participating in the race of pinning people against each other, or at least is not in a position to control the hate. Stanza 2, it was made certain I wouldn't, that I'd inherit nothing except a whipping of my hindquarters as a form of correction and the cadence of I love you, tar baby, I love you. So this is basically saying that society makes sure the narrator stays in a position of weakness. The narrator is constantly beaten and sent conflicting messages about their worth, such as the I love you, tar baby, I love you, because they're saying that they love them, but they're also calling them tar baby, which is a reference to tarring and feathering.
This is not unlike how my parents were raised to comply, and their parents before them, and theirs before them, and so forth as far back as anyone cared to speak of what they lived through, the preposterous preposition of it all. This stanza is representative of not only the fact that oppression has continued in our society for generations, but also the fact that this oppression has caused members of marginalized communities to become complacent, as if this tragedy is secondhand. This is shown especially in the line, and their parents before them, and theirs before them, and so forth as far back as anyone cared to speak of what they lived through. Oppression is so ingrained in our culture that the very people that experience dehumanizing behavior on a daily basis may not even care to speak about it. Therefore and thereafter, whenever I hear the word pedigree, I think of the blank check I don't have behind my name, and then I think of saddles and stirrups, and then the soreness of my lower back, and then the source of that. This stanza particularly speaks to the way that even though methods change, the treatment of marginalized peoples and the institutions that allow for this oppression remain the same. Similarly to the other italicized words in this story, the term pedigree is used to imply one person or group of people being above or on top of another. Pedigree in this sentence is used to reference an ancestral line, and Charleston uses this to make a statement how similarly to the way oppression is passed down to members of marginalized communities, privilege is passed down to their oppressors. That's why he states, whenever I hear the word pedigree, I think of the blank check I don't have behind my name. This is further reinforced in the next part of the stanza when he finishes his statement. And then I think of saddles and stirrups, and then the soreness of my lower back, and then the source of that. This phrase is a reference of slave labor enforced on black subjects, and when he thinks of the source of it, he's reminded of the aforementioned ancestral lines and history that come from the people who possessed privilege over them. Notice how Charleston uses the consonants of the S sounds repeated in the words saddles, stirrups, soreness, and source. It's as if he's using the S sounds to exhale, the way that one would exhale after finally being given a chance to have their stories heard.
Stanza 5. How a boss can ride you. Of this I am personally familiar, plus know by blood drawn from 2 lines of family men, forced to cut out their own tongues to keep food on the table they could no longer taste or even stand to. The word ride here talks of the authority figure controlling his family and violence done to ancestors who were possibly losing their will to live. This could also be looked at as a sexual innuendo, but that all depends on how you interpret it, although they both have controlling connotations regardless of how you look at it. The consonants in the repetition of T's throughout plays on the fact that the subject of this stanza is about cutting out one's tongue, which in turn makes them lose their voice and their ability to stand up for themselves. Stanza 6. Their tongues grew back, yes, after some time and with sharpness, I'm told. You need to cut against something, anything, to be purposeful given their new forms. There is an exaggerated use of the S sound here. This could depict the slur and/or difficulty you would have while your tongue grew back, and in turn, your voice and the ability for you to stand up for yourself. This stanza also includes a description of tongues growing back stronger than they were when they were cut. This also plays on the fact that someone may grow back stronger after they have been broken.
Stanza 7. Whoa, whoa, whoa. How a man rides his wife, his children, how he'd ride a horse he'll never have, could never give them, unless said horse is immaterial, hence not a horse at all. Stanza 7 shifts the power dynamic to the father, who is the head of the family, and it talks about the control he exerts over the woman and children. Woe is the word that a horseback rider would use to get the horse to slow down. So in this case, it's telling the man to slow down because he doesn't actually have the authority that he desires. Stanza 8. Just muscular as a stallion is, as a word is, that's denied striving families horsepower, any engine beyond their fragile bodies to propel them forward, the whole race forward, even if it pits people against a people, even if it means rearing a rear end tender and raw. I love you, tar baby, I love you something strong. This stanza serves as a transition back to the discussion of the horse and its power. There's a specific focus on the group that does not have horsepower, in this case, the speaker and his family, and then it talks briefly about its effect. The repetition of the P sound serves to emphasize the power that's given to an entire race of people against the speaker and his race. There's also repetition of the R sound in forward, race, and rearing, and tender and raw. All of this repetition serves to emphasize the importance of an entire race being dominant over another race of people. The last line, I love you, tar baby, I love you something strong, goes back to the conflicting message expressed in stanza 2, where there's the juxtaposition between I love you and tar baby. This is kind of the contrast between love and hate, and it goes back to the concept of love versus hate regarding skin color. Okay, so 3 central ideas we identified in the poem include oppression manifests itself as violence on the part of the aggressor and compliance of the victim, both of which play a role in perpetuating racism and patriarchy. Love and hate are complicated and often closely linked, and hatred's strength comes from its ability to pervade generations of people. For the first theme that we identified, we tried to identify the violence, examples of violence and compliance. So violence is evident in stanzas 2, 4, 5, and 7. In stanza 2, the speaker talks about whipping of hindquarters as a form of correction. In stanza 4, he talks about saddles and stirrups and the soreness of a lower back. And then in stanzas 5 and 7, he talks about cutting out tongues and a man riding his wife and kids. All these examples of violence are a contrast to the compliance evident in stanza 3. In stanza 3, the speaker talks about how his parents were raised to comply and how this compliance has been passed down through generations. The conflict between these two ideas supports the idea how violence and compliance are both evident in oppression. For the second theme, love and hate are complicated and often closely linked. This is most evident in the line, I love you, tar baby, I love you. Again, this is kind of the juxtaposition between the words I love you and tar baby. I love you obviously is representative of love, and tar baby is associated with a hateful crime. It's also evident in stanza 7, where family love conflicts with the family abuse, in the case of the father writing his wife and his children. For the third theme, we talked about how hatred's strength comes from its ability to pervade generations of people. This is most evident in stanza 3, where the speaker talks about how his parents were raised to comply and generations of his people before them.
There are some major things to take away after analyzing this work. First, the author makes the statement that hate is a strong word because its power as a word is representative of its power as a quality in human beings, linking it to the ways that people with hate use their power against others who possess none. And lastly, these institutions that reinforce some of these forms of oppression, such as heteronormativity, racism, and misogyny, are still present in our own society.